Rinkside with Emma Miskew and Ryan Steves.
Welcome back to Rinkside. Thank you for tuning in. My name is Ryan Steves. I am for the purposes of this podcast, I am a youth sports coach. I'm a father of two young athletes, and I've been dedicating a lot of time to this space. And I'm joined by my incredibly accomplished co-host Emma Miskew.
Hi. Yep. I'm a Miskew. I'm a Canadian curler from Ottawa. I'm an Olympian and world champion, and it's really nice to be here to talk about all things sports with everyone.
Yeah, and this is going to be a place where we gather, Emma and I gather, and bring in guests from time to time to tackle some of the conversations that we think parents in youth sports are having and issues they're concerned about. And we hope you join us on this fun adventure that we started. And
really excited for our conversation coming up today, a topic that is kind of new to the world of sports, at least compared to when we were growing up, about mental performance consulting. So we're really excited for our special guest today.
For episode 2 in this journey that Emma and I are on, today we're very fortunate to have Jason Boivin joining us. Jason, you're an accomplished athlete. Now you've entered the space of mental training, mental performance consulting. Maybe you can give people just a background on, who are you? How'd you get here? How are you in this space? And what are you doing?
We'll do a very quick Coles Notes sort of history.
Yeah.
You mentioned earlier an accomplished athlete. I wouldn't describe myself as an accomplished athlete, so that's very kind of you. I did, dredge through a long swimming career up to the national level. So I was a swimmer most of my life. Swam for 16 years. And I grew up in Montreal. So I grew up coaching also in my teens in the summers in Montreal. So maybe some of the listeners know the pool system in Montreal in the West Island. I went back to school, left Montreal, moved to Ottawa, did the grad degree here in Ottawa, at U Ottawa. And then, here opened up a new chapter in my career where I went into mental performance. And things picked up pretty quickly. It was pretty cool. I had one of my mentors. So Kyle was one of my mentors, and he brought me on board with a lot of things he was doing pretty quickly. And one thing led to another over a few years where, I had a lot of great work. And then a couple of years ago, I left all that and we pursued, some corporate stuff and some startup stuff. And, that lasted about a year. And then I was like, you know what? I miss consulting. Let's come back. And then, so about a year and a half ago, I came back to consulting. And this is sort of where, I had a few things that picked up quickly. And then also, trying to start a business again is hard, and the youth sport was right there, and it's something that I did before. I was like, you know what, let's go here. And now a year and a half later, it's going really well, and I'm really enjoying it.
Yeah, it's very interesting. I am curious, what age group do you find where is really impactful at the youth age, and where if it's when they're too young, is it not really that impactful because they're not really absorbing the content that you're bringing to them? And I've just been curious about that because I didn't have that resource when I was a kid, so didn't get to try it out.
Yeah, that's a great question. And I don't think any of us had that resource when we were a kid. Right? And so that's sort of one of my motivations to doing it. It's like, okay, hey, if I spoke to, 12-year-old Jason, this would be so useful. And, but to answer your question, I think it depends on the approach that you take. I think, just like we can teach kids anything. It just depends on how we approach it. Depends on the angle we take. I think, 11-year-olds, 10-year-olds, they can be super receptive to this if it's just geared towards that age group. And so like we see with the, the U12 team that Ryan coaches, we have a blast in the sessions. We're having so much fun.
Yeah.
But I'm coaching it or I'm teaching it very differently than I would the U18s.
Right.
And so the pace is slower. It's more detailed, more examples. Down. Get it into the questions are a little bit easier. The concepts are a bit more high level, but they're still going in depth and they're still having a great time. And so it can work. It just has to be geared towards the right age group. Of course, then there's puberty plays into that too. And so, once you go through the middle years, 13, 14, 15, it gets a bit more difficult. And then they sort of mature again after 16, 17, 18. But again, if you're able to nail the age and the stage and what they're receptive to, then I think it can work.
And I think a lot of the issues that come from athletes in young sports is like the pressures of performing, the pressures of doing something great. You want to be the best. Do you find that the pressures like that they are feeling are often coming from within, or do you think it's a lot of the time pressures from their parents?
Yeah. A lot of our, we'll say, challenges in life are learned. And so, the challenges that our parents are experiencing and what they value or stress about is going to get, learned by the children. And so I feel like the same thing can be said for a team. Like if there's a coach that prioritizes certain things in a team setting, then those are the things that the athletes are going to stress about because that's what they value. And so it can be so important to set that culture and to set that coaching style. So yeah, if they're in a safe space, if the coach creates a good space, if they're let's say if they reiterate what they value in terms of growth or development versus performance in the moment, then they can have a very different relationship with stress and a very different relationship with performance.
I think that's great, Jason. One of the things that intrigues me, and I see what you're doing with our team. I sit down in these sessions that Jason does with these U12 boys. But if you pull back a little bit, are you seeing any particular issues or trends that are popping up with youth as you go down to this level, and you're getting more involved with youth? Are there certain common themes you're seeing? I'm really interested in Emma's question about, are these parent-driven anxieties, issues? Are these just now normal things that you're seeing in kids as they wrangle with the nature of competitive sports and where we're at today? What are you seeing?
Yeah, I think it's all the above, right? It's the influence of either your teachers or your coaches or your parents is always there because the kids are impressionable. Like they're learning all the time, implicitly and explicitly, from what you're saying and what you're doing, what they see the peers doing, what they see all these role models doing. So yeah, it's all of the above. And it highlights how they have to triage all this stuff that they're learning, right? When the teacher says something different than the parent, when the coach says something different than another coach, right? When they see a parent, parent another kid, and they're watching, that they're picking all this up and they're figuring it out on their own. And so it's really hard for them to work with all that information in their head.
Really?
And so that's why a little bit of guidance really does help.
Really?
Do you ever think that giving like mental training to the parents of young kids could also be really helpful? Because I feel like from what you see, even I didn't grow up in hockey, but you hear of like hockey parents, and not all of them are like that, but just really intense yelling, want their kid to get all the playing time. They want their kid to do the best. And so you hear these stories. And I always wonder, because I know that feeling that pressure of not only performing for yourself, but also like not wanting to disappoint your parents can be really overwhelming for a young kid. And I wonder if almost before they get to the point where they can absorb this sort of training themselves, if it would be helpful to actually run parents through these trainings sessions, so at least they understand the impact.
Is it? Absolutely. I mean, it's the worst thing in the world for a kid to disappoint their parents, right? It's so important, regardless of whether the parent is doing it out of goodwill or not. Mm-hmm. And you're right on the money, Emma. Like that's actually the solution that I'm trying to bring forward in the next couple of years for me and my my consulting is to start working with the parents and to see the impact there, because there's a lot of different people in the mental space work with coaches and work with organizations, and that works really well. But we found that there's few people working with parents, and parents spend so much time with their kids, right? And they parent their kids, right? So it could be super, super useful. No one reads a parenting manual, right? Like it doesn't exist. Maybe nor should it in that sense, because there's so many different styles. But we know that there's some key skills or ways of intervening with kids that really help their growth. And so bringing that forward from to parents could be so useful. So you're right on the money, and that's something that I'm going to invest a significant amount of time in the future, in the near future, to try and solve.
Yeah, I know. Like growing up, my mom always, she wanted the best, and it was never from a place of frustration. But she would definitely feel our losses the same way that I would feel them. But then she would become quieter So then the car rides home, I thought she was mad at me, but she was just like sad for me. But then that's how I took it. So I'm always like curious, but we didn't have like resources like that to be like, oh, or even me be able to say like, are you mad at me? Because that wasn't ever the case, but that's how I took it. So having training for these parents could be really interesting. I think it could change a lot of these young athletes' experiences for the better.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, you're right on the money, right? And those interactions can be so much better with just a little bit of knowledge and training, right? Having kids, or in a lot of the individual sessions that I do with, any age, one of the common threads is communication. Like, can you communicate how you feel? Can you communicate something that you might view as being challenging? Can you receive communication that's challenging? Because that's like a great example of a misconnection there, right? Like, your mom clearly didn't mean bad, or she didn't mean any ill will. But, you're both internalizing things differently, and it didn't match. It ended up being worse. And that's such a common story. And so I think we can, quickly, with a little bit of training, help people start to get around that.
Listen, I love this idea, Emma. There is a lot of parent training out there. I know in the minor hockey world, you have to take respect in sports, and parents have to sign off that paid attention to some of this. I mean, I see this as just another one of these awesome tools in the, called the development matrix for kids. A whole nother topic is the specialization of sports and professionalization of youth sports. I feel like we've almost created this problem for kids that this is something they now need. But I guess what I'm interested is, what is the entry point? So you've got people listening, you've got people who all recognize that this would be awesome for my son or daughter to have access to. What's a good entry point? Is it for people like yourself to come in and work with teams? Is it to start with one-on-one sessions? Is the half the battle just identifying what issues are and what your child may need? And what's the entry point for people?
That's a great question. I've never actually thought about what the entry point would be for a parent in that sense. Yeah, I think the number one thing to do for a parent would be to, when they're shopping around for different clubs that they're going to sign up for, ask some questions or try to understand what the club values and, where they put their resources. And so, is it all about performance, or is it about, building good citizens? Right? I'm pulling on the Auto 67s piece here, and that's something that spoke to me pretty loud when I was looking up the organization to potentially work with. It's like, okay, they care about the development of their kids.
Yep.
And so I think that's a big green flag in terms of, what parents can look for. And then in terms of just, learning about it. So it's like, okay, hey, like, what's the difference between, psychotherapy and mental performance, right? What's the difference between mental illness and mental performance? And so, these are things that we're trying to bring to the general public so that there's an understanding. And you can categorize it so that, and see, well, when you categorize it well, you're able to then understand where to move and where to go, and what potentially your child is struggling with, right? Is it a mental illness that they're struggling with, or is it just inability to manage stress in the moment? Right. So, the solutions there are different.
I asked my son, again, full disclosure, who works with Jason on this team that I coach. And I said, yeah, you know what? I'm going on Rinkside this morning with Emma, and we're going to chat with Jason. Like, do you have any views? Do you have any input? Do you have any comments? And he's like, what, do you want me on the show? And I said,
guess number 3.
Exactly. I said, no, but what's your takeaway? And he's like, and this is verbatim what he said. I think it's great we have access to it. I think all kids should do it, and they should hire Jason, or they should hire someone, but not just anyone, Jason, because he's the best. No. So you hear it right from the source. And I mean, I think that's my endorsement, and that's, I think, what people listening should pay attention to. If our team brings in a skating coach or a strength and conditioning coach and Jason, my experience so far has been they probably get the most excited for you. And I think it's because it's new. There's, just like working out in the gym, there's tangible results that I think you bring. And so, I'd encourage parents to think about this, right? And coaches and associations all the way up. It does seem odd that it's not in the mix as much, but this is a long meandering way of getting to this. it's gaining more traction. Emma's talked about it. Emma's at the highest level in her sport. And, you're doing it, Emma. I never had this. I grew up in junior hockey in the late 90s, and I went through college and pro, and the answer was always just suck it up. Or, if you can't deal with it, maybe that's part of your assessment. You just can't deal with things mentally. And so why is there a reason why this is gaining more traction, more attention now, more accessibility? Because there's a lot of people doing it.
Mm-hmm. Well, first of all, I love Wyatt's feedback. I really appreciate it. That's awesome, right? And I think the success of the sessions really comes down to the kids just being open, and engaging.
Yeah.
So yeah, it goes both ways for sure.
Yeah.
But why is this gaining traction now? So, I was thinking about this because we talked about this yesterday, and there has been a significant uptick and increase in research in this space in the past 20 years. And so, if you track mindfulness research, for instance, like it's gone up exponentially, right? There's been that hockey stick moment if you look at it on a graph. And so there's so much more research now. And so that, and I think also the general shift in how we view mental health is also helping.
Mm-hmm.
And so, similar to the Renaissance in strength and conditioning, 40 years ago, right? If we talk to, athletes that were in the maybe 60s and 70s, it's like, oh, you went to the gym? Like, why would I do that? Right? It didn't exist. And then there was a strength and conditioning renaissance, right? And now everyone does it, and it's a staple.
Yeah, I mean, when I had heard, a few years ago of young athletes, in the 9 to 11 range talk about, meeting with a mental performance coach, you would sort of think like, oh, poor them. Like, I wonder what they're dealing with. It is that stigma, or that you're so privileged that you're trying to just get better through just another quiver, right? But I think you're right. I think the barriers to access to mental health, it's those coming down is really helping. And then when you step back, I think you're right. It's just, this is another tool for families, for kids, to unlock that full potential and to ease their mind. I think that's the biggest thing I've seen you do, Jason. That's incredible. It's just to give them another thing to think about, to ease some of those anxieties, the pressures. Because these kids they're just young kids. And if I'm talking about minor sports for a minute, they're dealing with a lot. And so to come to the playing field, rink, court with a little extra in their arsenal to cope, the better.
Yeah, and I think it's about more than like it being something that's like an issue that has to be dealt with. It's about learning how to like you said, accept feedback, be able to communicate properly. I think that feedback is often viewed, at least when I was growing up, as this negative thing. It's like criticism. But when you're on a sports team, it's not meant to be criticism. It's meant to be constructive in a way, like constructive feedback, like giving you information to be better. And everyone's only trying to help each other. No one's trying to tear anyone down. But when I was growing up, feedback was viewed as this awful thing that you turn your back up to. So I think teaching kids at a young age that, no, that's actually a good thing, and that's only going to help you if you listen to that information, is the most important, I think, in my opinion, and constructive way of helping these kids.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you're right on the money. And it'll be really cool to see, over the next couple of years, let's say with the U12 team, when they become U13, U14, U15, and to see the evolution of multiple years of that, and the relationship, like Emma, like you said, the relationship with feedback completely changes, and the relationship to failure completely changes, and the way they, develop that resilience completely changes. And so it'll be cool to see the results over the years personally, but and we know the results obviously over years of mental training work, but it'll be fun to see it firsthand with kids.
Yeah, and obviously this is a smash hit show, Jason, and there's millions of people listening. And so when they're trying to manage all of this, what do they look for? Because I got to admit, it's tough when you start to click on some of these websites and people boasting about what they offer. It's a tough one to navigate. And I think just the fact that you do it isn't enough, because this is probably the most important aspect. This may be the most important feedback in the loop that these kids get. So what is a club supposed to look for? What is a parent supposed to look for before they hire someone?
Okay. Yeah. A good question. Yeah. So we're what we're looking for is that stamp, certified mental performance consultant. Like that is the gold standard in mental performance.
Okay.
And so there's a lot of different types of service providers out there that exist that sort of dive into the mental space. Maybe they're a psychotherapist, maybe they're even a life coach, and they think they can do it. But unfortunately, they haven't gone through the necessary training to make it safe and adaptable for these populations and these topics. And so that's what we're looking for. And there's the Canadian Sports Psychology Association that exists, and there's the American Applied Sports Psychology Association in the U.S. as well that exists. And so both those sites have directories, and so that's a great place to start. And on those sites as well, it talks all about how mental performance works and what service providing looks like and how it can be integrated, and so that that is the best place to go. And then there's obviously you might run into some people that are in training, and so they're working towards a CMPC, whether they're still in grad school or whether they're done grad school and get their hours done. And that's a great place to explore as well. And that's actually one of the places you can get more accessible service, right? Because as they're training, they have to either do it for free or do it for a reduced rate.
Right. And I love the fact that you're a former athlete who, I think
weekend warrior now, I suppose.
That's right. But you bring a different appreciation to it, I think, being a former athlete, and something that these kids can really resonates with them. So
thank you so much for your insight and joining us. And I'm sure lots of people will be very interested to hear what you do. Yeah,
my pleasure. Absolutely. It's great to be here. Really appreciate the invite.
I've got my favorite cup on it.
Oh, Ted Lasso. Here you go.
This is the best. That's awesome. That's the only recourse I have. That's the only accessibility that I have to mental strength and conditioning, is we're thinking what Ted Lasso would say. So brought it up for you this morning, Jason.
Thank you. Yeah. That's actually a pretty good litmus test.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
That's right. That's great. Yeah. Well, thanks so much for being here. Again, Jason Boivin. Love what you're doing. Keep it up. The proof is in the pudding. The kids love you, and it's paying off. I see it on the front lines with some of these hockey players. So great job.
Sweet.
Thanks for being here.
Well, thanks.
What a fantastic discussion with Jason Boivin. And, just to recap, Jason, full-time mental performance consultant, a certified mental performance consultant, which we heard is sort of the badge that parents and clubs need to look for. He had some awesome insights. And I think more importantly, it's just so fun to dig into something like this that's becoming more present in youth sports. What were some of your hot takes, Emma?
The thing that's the coolest for me is that these youth have the access and I think it's a great start, because I think back to when I was growing up and we were in similar situations where we didn't have access to a mental performance consultant who could have potentially made things a little bit easier on us with all those pressures that we're feeling. I know growing up, that feedback piece that we talked about was definitely the most challenging. Anything that was brought to me that was like, you should change this, it was an absolute, like, you think I'm bad, or it was a meltdown, right, or I'd be in tears. And it was always just in order to make me better. But at the time, that's not how it was viewed. It was like this negative, I'm not doing this perfect. And knowing as a kid that you don't have to be perfect. Right. And if that's the type of mindset that he's bringing, I think it's so valuable.
Yeah. So as you heard, he was hired by the Junior 67s Club, which is one of the 5 AAA hockey clubs in the Ottawa region. And so this was new to our crew. And again, I'm coaching U12. So this is, mostly 11-year-olds. And I think one of the things that stuck with me and sitting in on these was he introduced, this fixed versus growth mindset. So it's kind of what you're describing. It's, you don't need perfection. What can you control? How can you turn a certainty into I'm not good at something, turning it into, well, if I do these few things, I can improve, and having that type of mentality. Mm-hmm. And what we heard Jason talk about is, you have to tailor how you deliver these things, of course, to the age and what they're capable of. And I think that just giving these kids this reminder that you can have a growth mindset, it's a choice. And how do you do that? And if you're listening and it sounds all hokey to you, That couldn't be further from the truth. I've seen these kids take it in, and I've seen them apply it, and it's pretty cool. So going up, I know there's a bit of a curling tournament coming up, isn't there? maybe the Scotties next week.
Sure.
And so you talk about perfection. I mean, well, you guys are as close to perfection. I think you and Team Homan are about as close to perfection lately as many have seen. How do you approach this? What are some of the tools that you're thinking about in those moments? These are big moments. You're at the top of the game.
And I think there's never perfection. Perfection is impossible. You can have a perfect game, but everyone's contributing to that great game. Your whole team's contributing there. So I think it was learning years ago, because I've played in a few now, that
you've won a few.
You're not going to be perfect, and that's okay. It's about how you bounce back from any mistakes, how you learn from any mistakes without letting it affect your headspace. And it was years ago. This is actually when I started making the biggest leaps in mental health and mental training. It was a Scotties. It was years ago. And I was just not feeling it. I wasn't having, shooting wise, I was not having my best week. And then I started to just get in my own head about it. I felt like I was letting my team down. I felt like people were watching me and noticing that I wasn't playing well and talking about it. It was all the thoughts were going through my head. What are people saying about me? When they put my stats up on TV, they must be like, why is she even on this team? They're going to kick her off the team. All the things. My head just was full of all the thoughts. And for the majority of that event, I just was I was scared to throw, didn't do anything to change it, was just sad and not confident. And it was, I think after 11 games, I went to Rachel and I just said, what are you seeing? Because I'm frustrated and I just I want to play better. And she's like, oh, I'm just this. If you just do a bit more of this, then you'll be good. Really? And then in my head, I was like, why did I take 11 games to ask her that information? What was I was protecting myself. I was protecting my ego. And instead of asking her in game 1, what are you seeing that I could fix it for game 2? I waited 11 games, didn't say anything, was unapproachable, was not a good version of myself. And then she told me, I fixed it and I started to play well. And so after that event, I went home. I had a meeting with a mental health or mental performance consultant. I went through my whole reasoning for how my brain was working through these events and how my ego was getting in the way and the perfectionism. And then it was a huge turning point in my career. I'm more resilient. I can rebound from a tough start. We know that perfection is impossible. Otherwise it wouldn't be a sport. So it's all about how you bounce back. And that was a big turning point for me. But that happened in my early 20s. That didn't happen when I was 12 or 13. I didn't have those if I started a game playing badly, I was likely not going to play well that whole game. It's it's just going to be one of those games instead of being okay, I'll just fix it next end. It's not a big deal. So I think it's really cool that he has kids learning that at a younger age than what we had.
Yeah, no kidding. And that's so interesting to hear you talk about that, because we all watch. We followed your career and Team Homan's career for so long, and perfection is a tough one. If that guides you, it's that fixed versus growth mindset. If this is a term that you're not familiar with, fixed is sort of that position that you're talking about, right? It's just that's how it's going to be, and I hear that so often. It's just one of those days. You hear it's just one of those games. It's not going our way.
That's right.
We, my son's U12 team, we had a game the other day against one of the top teams. We had just won 2 huge games, and I went into it knowing I just don't think today's one of those days. You could just sort of sense it that these kids, they're so young. There's so much going on in their lives. We're demanding so much of them. We're overscheduling them. We're putting pressure on them that we never had as kids, and so it's interesting to hear you say that it took you 11 games to approach Rachel, because you've been curling with her forever, right? So
and that's her problem. It was I was the problem. Like I was unapproachable. She felt like she couldn't just tell me the feedback because I wasn't in a place where I was open to hearing it.
Yeah.
And that was a lot of the work that I did, was just being like, you know what, I'm going to put myself in a vulnerable position so that my teammates feel that it's a safe space to share something with me when they feel they have to. And that's where I've come a long way from a communication standpoint, is tell me. And if my face looks a certain way after, it's okay. I do want to hear it. Like I'll try to control my face, but I do want to hear what you have to say, because I don't think you would ever share something with me to make me feel bad. You would only share something to me to help me. And so that's,
That sounds like a development in your mind of and then listen, it's got to be way different in the curling rink versus hockey rink, basketball court, baseball diamond. You know, the interactions between teammates are much more intimate or much more direct in curling, I imagine, than they would be on a hockey rink, for instance. I think it comes from a place, you know, and let's go back to Jason for a minute. You know, I think you asked the question, where are these pressures coming from, right? Are these self-imposed pressures? Are they parent led pressures? And so that's of course different from what you're talking about versus youth in sport, but learn behavior, what they see, right? So if you head into a game and you think your teammates don't like you and you're on a bad streak, who's going to pick you up? You know, it's a lot to ask of 11, 12, 13-year-olds for their friends to just pick you up every day and make sure you're in this great headspace. And so what better way than to give these kids tools to, you know, try on their own, right? What can I do to control my game? I have to block out everything else around me and just focus on X or Y. And I'll tell you, Jason, and what I see with our kids, particularly my son, they're implementing strategies on a daily basis. And whether that's mantras, whether that's, you know, a checklist. Have I thought about these things today? If you can say yes, what better way to walk into a game than feeling like you have control over that side of it? Because it's a very impactful part, right? And very impactful part of performing at the peak level. And that's what all these mental performance consultants talk about, is just unlocking that potential, not having your mind be the barrier.
Yeah. And I don't know, with your hockey career, can you remember any time where you had teammates that would really try to help everybody else? Like they weren't focused on their own performance, but they would mostly try to help everyone else, and like how that affected your performance. Like, I don't know if you had that experience, but I'm curious, because on a bigger team, that could be pretty impactful.
It's effectively non-existent, Emma. And you know, I guess here's the challenge. Talk about minor hockey, right? It's this dog-eat-dog race to the top. No one really knows what the top is, but there's this sense that it's very ultra competitive. And as you get higher, that's even more dramatic. It's especially the professional or collegiate levels. You're vying for spots on teams. You can be discarded at any minute. Even for someone like myself, you know, drafted, signed to the NHL, nothing's guaranteed. Tomorrow's not a guarantee. I always call it's the perpetual tryout. You know, you're just constantly in a perpetual tryout. There's always someone younger, better, faster coming along to replace you. And so no, there's not really that support network the way there might be on a curling team like yours. Because the person sitting next to me wants my spot. And even then, I don't know what it's like today. I imagine this you know, the mental performance consulting is pretty present in the professional ranks and even collegiate ranks than it was when I went through. But man, I went through some challenging times where I would have loved to have had someone to turn to have that conversation with, and to be given some tools. Because honestly, when I went through, there were people on the player development side, and if you spoke to them frankly, that would get brought up the food chain and almost used as a negative, right? Oh, I was talking to Ryan, and he's not in a good headspace, and it's translating to his play. And maybe he's not as strong mentally as we thought, you know, or as an example. So,
yeah, that's too bad that was an experience that you went through. At least now you know that your son's not going to have that same experience with you being around and with the resources that are available. But I think that it's great that there's a change in the culture to realize that it's not something that's needed as a Band-Aid. It's something that can help all these athletes from a young age to learn how to manage not only their emotions, their egos, how to be confident, to know that perfectionism is impossible. You can strive for it, but you're just always going to have to strive for it. It's never going to be a full, you're perfect. So I think that's really good for everyone coming up. And at least we both learned from our experiences and we're able to battle through it.
Okay, Emma, that was a really fun episode. I really enjoyed that one. Again, for our listeners, Jason Boivin, mental performance consultant, really fascinating stuff. I really hope our parents of youth sports, competitive or otherwise, listening can take something away and even maybe decide to jump into it and see what it might offer their child. Yeah,
absolutely. I love hearing about just these younger generations getting access to this. I think it's only going to help them not only as individuals as they grow up, but also in their sport. And it creates a safe space for just being honest about how you're feeling and all that good stuff that's coming. So it's really exciting.
Yeah. So big thanks to Jason. Give him a look. It's called JB Performance Consulting. Give him a check out and give him a call if this is something that interests you or your club or your family. You won't be disappointed. So big thanks to Jason. Thanks to you, Emma, for all your insights.
Yeah, and thanks everyone for listening, and hopefully you got something really cool out of this conversation.
Yeah. Thanks for listening to Rinkside.